Well, we welcome you back into the Mountaineer locker room then and now. Frank had a little technical difficulty, so for those folks who were watching previously, I'm assuming there was a little bit of they saw, and now we're back starting all over again. So we'll go from the top. I'm Greg Chris. That's Frank Fear, and we have a great guest tonight, Keenan Cummings, on with us to talk about um, the beloved transfer portal and everything that's going on with that in football and basketball. And Frank, I know we talked earlier. Keenan and I talked about how folks like him, it has to be head spinning trying to keep up with everything that's going on in this transfer portal.
It's just how can we put it, Greg? It's we haven't seen anything like this, and so it's new to all of us: the coaches, the beat writers, people like us, fans, everybody, players, and it's just very difficult. In fact, I've talked to a number of fans, and they said, it's hopefully this will be the pause that refreshes. They're paying attention, but this time of year, we're usually at the point where we're getting serious about the two deep looks like. We're looking at what other teams are and where West Virginia fits into the mix. You can do all of that, but there's so many question marks. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, yeah, and you just watch it daily, and you hope that, and you have faith in your coaching staff that the players they're bringing in, will be good players and able to compete. And I know we'll get to all this here in just a moment with the number of people on the roster, seniors, etc. But it's I think for fans, it's extremely difficult to adjust to. Coach Rodriguez and some of the assistants and some of the press conferences they've given is that it's just the world we live in, and they've adjusted and are figuring it out, and obviously we're not in it alone. Everybody in the country is going through the exact same thing, and it's just a crazy time, and you hope with the settlement coming in, the revenue sharing, and maybe somewhere down the line a salary cap, if you will, for lack of a better term. You hope that stabilizes some of this, and it at least gets it in a fashion that we can understand it, and not that it matters whether we can understand it or not, but it's easier to put a program together and build a program and coach. Now it's you just wonder how much of that there is that you're building. It's hard to build when you have 50 new players every year. So you hope that some of these things that are coming down the pike in the future with revenue sharing and the other things I mentioned, you hope that it offers a little bit of stability to the whole thing. And I think that's in everybody's best interest. I think fans would like that much better. Players probably would. I mean, can you imagine if you are a college player and you're looking for that NIL and you're a good player and you're out there in the portal and maybe you're not getting as many looks as you thought, or not from any place that you want to get them from. It has to be tough on the players too, and then changing places. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do either. You may be at Oklahoma State one year and then West Virginia the next year, so that's a big adjustment for the kids as well. So it's just tough on everybody, and you hope that somewhere down the line here in the next few years there is a little bit of stability. And I'm anxious to hear Keenan's take on that when we get back to him. What he sees in the future, what he sees coming down the line. Again, he is a lot more in the know than we are, and hopefully has a better handle on what's going to happen.
Well, people like Keenan, top drawer as he is always valuable, even more so this year because as we were mentioning, as you mentioned, we had technical problems. And I was mentioning on the earlier feed, which you won't be able to see anymore, that wvsports.com and also the X feed that the Keenan has, just more valuable than ever before in terms of keeping fans up to date. And there's the old saying: the more things change, the more they stay the same. That doesn't apply to college sports. This is a new reality. So you're absolutely right. Why don't we bring Keenan in, and we'll get back to it and hear from him.
Yep, Keenan, welcome back. And sorry about the glitches there. We'll try not to be overly repetitive, but we won't be able to go back and see the earlier things that you talked about. I wanted to go back and touch on some of those things. One, the number of people we're talking about being brought in, and then the number of seniors, juniors on the roster, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd also ask you about the different types of players, whatever the case may be with the players coming in now as opposed to years past. So I'll just turn it over to you and let you get us caught back up.
All right, I will try this the best I can. I think that the thing that's important here, guys, and I think I'll start here, it is a new era in college athletics. It's very apparent. I said this last time I was on with you guys. It's never been easier to rebuild a roster quicker. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to rebuild it successfully and it's going to lead to 10 wins in 1 year, but you give yourself a chance. And I think that's something that Rich Rodriguez and his staff recognize. They've embraced. And when you look at what they've done so far, they've added 64 guys to the roster. That's transfers, freshmen that'll enroll, at the end of the month, the junior college players, 64 guys. If you add the 12 guys that the former staff signed that are still with the team or will join the team, 76 players since December.
Wow.
I mean, that's if you go back, 5-6 years ago, that's 4 or 5 recruiting classes. I mean, there used to be counters too. I mean, you could only add 25 guys each year. So, I mean, that took 3 recruiting classes to get those kind of numbers. And the thing that I've noticed, though, and I will say this is different than what I saw under Neil, and I don't want to mean that Neil didn't do this to a degree.
Right.
But Rich is really forcing competition. He's bringing in guys that want to win, guys that he thinks can help him win now. And I asked him about that in the spring. I said, when you guys are out looking for transfers, because everybody does it differently. Everybody has different plans. I said, do you look for guys that have multiple years, guys that can make an impact right away? Is it a mix? And he basically just told me, we want guys that can help us win. We're not worried about their eligibility. We'll figure that out later. They want guys that can help them win. And if you look at the guys they've added, they have 41 seniors on the roster, and 36 of those are new. 5 of those guys started their career at West Virginia. 36 of them.
Wow.
Now, there's a couple holdovers. Tarnew's back, getting that extra year of eligibility, but most of them are brand new transfers to the program. And juniors, I believe the number is 24, 26, I believe, something around in there. So you do the math there. I mean, that's a lot of upperclassmen that weren't there for West Virginia. They lost a lot of pieces from this roster and had to replace a lot of people fast. And the thing that I've noticed, and it's really apparent, is, I thought it was funny. You ask Rich, I asked him towards the end of the spring, what positions are you going to target? And, it kind of sounded almost coach speak-esque, well, look at everybody except quarterback. Guys, look at what they've added. Quite literally every position on the roster except quarterback and punter. Every other spot they've added guys. And I think that speaks to what they're trying to create. Competition, culture, they're buzzwords, but I think they have meaning with what Rich is trying to build. Running back's a perfect example of this. They had 3 guys. You had Jaheim White, Ty Edwards, and Dior Hubbard, who I've heard they've liked quite a bit. But what they went and done? They added 3 more. They want competition. They want the cream to rise to the top. And I think that by forcing that, you're not necessarily designating, hey, this guy's going to be your starter. We're going to find some guys to fill out the roster. It's, hey, we have this spot. We're going to bring in guys to compete. And if you earn it, you get it. And there could be multiple guys playing. Obviously, they want to play with tempo. But it's apparent to me that it's more than coach speak. He is absolutely trying to make this the most competitive roster that he can in his first year atop the program.
Yeah, I think that's you look at the folks he has brought in. Um, a lot of it's hard to say they're top notch players, but if you look at what they did last year, you don't always know from where they come from or the competition they played against. But some really good players, and like you said, more than just one or two at the positions, but several of them. And one thing I'd ask you about before we went off was the offensive lineman. It seems like that's been a real emphasis from the beginning, even up until now. Um, this offensive line, I know his offense really, of course, any offense is predicated on how good the offensive line is and what they can do. But there's a certain type of lineman that I think depends on. It's not the the 6'6", 320-pound guy. It's people that can move and zone block and those type of things. Are you seeing that? As far as linemen are concerned, am I wrong in that fact that he's brought in a ton of offense?
No, you're not wrong at all. I mean, you look at what they lost last year. They probably couldn't even field an offensive line with what they returned.
Yeah.
They lost almost 13,000 snaps in their career. They lost their top 6 options. Those guys were gone. Then they lost several key reserves that they thought they were going to depend on. So the only way to do that is to kind of develop the guys you got and then bring in some help. They brought in 11 transfers, guys, 11 on the offensive line. It's a mix. You have some young guys that have potential. Robbie Martin's one of those, Aiden Bussell, some other guys that they brought in that can help. And then they brought in some really, really experienced guys too. Some guys that have played at high levels, some guys that have played a lot of snaps in their career. And now it's about kind of mixing and matching and seeing which one works. I started doing depth charts. I waited a while this year. Usually I start that in February is my first release. You could forget that this year. There was no way. I released my first one for offense this past week.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was first putting it together, I was struggling to find guys to put at certain spots. Now, after the spring rush, you're starting to feel better about the depth. Now, obviously, like you said, it's got to translate. Guys have to earn roles, but you feel better about at least the makeup of the room. And that's what they had to do. Rich said at the end of spring, they need 8 guys, at least 8 they can trust. They're a lot closer to that 8 now, I believe, than they were when spring ended.
Do you think, and I kind of feel this way, but do you think it's been helpful for them? The defense, we have quite a few players come back on defense, so there wasn't, a ton of focus on defensive players being brought in, but mostly have been on the offensive side. And of course, he's, Coach Rodriguez, known as an offensive genius. I feel pretty good about the fact that, our defense has some returners and, he can focus on the offense and get his type of player into the skill positions and that sort of thing and the line. But is that, you think that's going to work in their favor where he can focus on the offense in this portal?
Well, I think it's been kind of a mix, really. I mean, I think they hit defense really hard the first time. They added a lot of DBs. They added some linebackers, some edge rushers, and they kind of filled some of that in this second window. So I like the pieces they've added there. Obviously, he has a lot of trust in Zach Alley, kind of gives him the keys to that thing. And I think that it shows you the commitment. I don't want to say growth because that's not necessarily fair, but that was one of the knocks, when Rich was here. It seems like he was focused on offense and defense was, kind of there at times. But I think that there's a clear commitment here. They want to be aggressive. They want to be attacking. And they've gotten some pieces that there. You can never have enough pass rushers. You can never have enough defensive linemen. You just can't. I don't care what you return. You can never have enough defensive backs that can cover. And those are the spots they've really hit heavily. And even spots they did have guys coming back like linebacker, they still have added some pieces. So I think that that's going to help. And, he kind of is given the keys to Zach and his staff to kind of handle that. And that, Rich is obviously, he's going to have his hands all over the offense. He's the head coach, but he's going to be the offensive coordinator. He's going to be the guy that makes the decisions there. So I'm comfortable with what Rich does on offense. and I'm optimistic with what they've done with defense. Now, obviously, we can look at numbers, we can look at snaps played, we can look at all that stuff, and in the end, it doesn't really mean much until guys actually put it out on the field. But from what they've been able to gather, kind of what they've plucked, they've got guys from every level, Power 4, Group of 5, FCS, Division 2, junior college. And I think they've gotten some really, really good pieces. I actually feel a lot better defensively, especially in the secondary. That was a really concerning spot, cornerback room. And I think they've added 7 or 8 transfers, to fill that out. Right now in the cornerback room, there's not a single player that returns last year that played any snaps. So it's completely brand new with transfers and some guys that were all conference players, all-Americans at points in their careers. So I feel better about what they've done, and I think that they would too, if you ask them honestly.
Well, based on your assessments, and again, maybe putting you on the spot here, but are there any of these guys coming in, Jaheim White and Nico, but are there any of these the transfer guys coming in, people that stand out in your mind, and maybe people that we should be looking forward to?
Talking about offense, defense, both?
Yes, offensively.
Well, I like Cam Vaughn a lot. Cam Vaughn was a leading receiver for Jacksonville State last year. He obviously has experience in the scheme. I think he's going to play quite a bit. They've added some other receivers too. I think that's a room that right now is kind of jumbled together, but they've got some guys. A guy they added recently, Logan Rampert. Everybody kind of forgets about Jaden Bray because he was injured last year, but I think he has a chance to be pretty good offensively. I really like the receiving tight end they added, Grayson Barnes. Not really the mold of kind of the Jacob Barrick blocking type. He's more of a receiving threat. I'm really interested, excited to see kind of how they use him, because that's the one change that is really different this time around compared to when Rich was first here. The tight end was basically, an extra blocker, or they used a lot of fullback. Now they use a lot of 11 personnel, 12 personnel. They haven't necessarily thrown it to the tight end a ton, but I think if you have those options, it'll be interesting, with a guy like Ryan Ward, who they added from North Carolina. And the running back room is pretty exciting too. I mean, there's a lot of names there that you can kind of sort through that have had success other places. Ty Edwards was one of the highest graded transfers, at least according to Pro Football Focus, that they added. He's a bigger back. Jalen Knighton had a really good career between Miami and SMU. Yeah, Cannon Katzer was very good at Ferris State last year, and obviously that's a jump. And maybe the guy that nobody's talking about is Sincere Bowers, the junior college guy they added. He's still got to be eligible to make sure that he's able to get there in the summer. But if he does, I think he's kind of a perfect fit for what Rich wants to do offensively. And then I know everybody's going to ask about quarterbacks. Right now, guys, I think that position, if I had to pick one, it would be Nico, just due to the experience and what he brings to the table. But I think Jalen Henderson's going to have a say in that. And it wouldn't surprise me. Rich has done it before. If you see more than one quarterback take some snaps this year.
That's interesting. I think people are excited about what there is to come, and I know when I see these names. Of course, I've learned too from looking at these, when you see transfers come in, they play them up and they show up on game day, and you're like, well, it's not exactly what I expected, but I think looking at some of these guys and being able to see their past play does make you excited. And I think most people are really looking forward to this season. I just think that even though we've had to rebuild it, and it's going to be tough. It's like I told Frank on there one other time. Everybody since Rich is coming back, everybody expects us to go 11-0 and win the Sugar Bowl, and that may not happen in the first year. It may take a little time, but I think people are excited about Mountaineer football being what we expect it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think if you look at, the one thing I can say is just they're going to play hard. They're going to be physical. It's going to be a brand of football that I think. I mean, everybody's seen it before. If you followed football, yep, West Virginia for any time, that those West Virginia teams under Rich Rodriguez were a team that other teams didn't want to play. Now, how many wins does that translate to? I don't know. this point. I think that preseason projections right now, when you're turning over basically 3/4 of your roster, is almost impossible. You're just guessing off production, and a lot of those things. You look at that, guys. You go, how much production is returning? What did they lose, and then what did they bring in? Well, the bring in is like significant this time, and it's really going to be how they all translate, how they all fit together. But I think there's more options now than there were even heading into the spring, and I think that's what they wanted to do. It was clear that they meant it. They were going to go out and get in the transfer portal and be aggressive in the spring. They did that. They landed some really highly recruited guys. That second window, there's not necessarily as many players. There's some good ones, but they went out and tried to get the best ones that they could get, guys that other Power 4 schools were all over, and they landed quite a few of them. So I think you feel good about that, and you hope that continues into the summer.